Welcome back to the Patio Pondering Podcast, where we're searching for clear thinking in complex agriculture. You know, agriculture spends a lot of time talking about markets, policy, technology, and efficiency. But underneath all that, there's a deeper question: how agriculture learns to think about risk, growth, and decision-making over time. Today, I'm joined with Dr. Michael Langemeier from Purdue University's Department of Agriculture Economics and the Center for Commercial Ag. It's interesting that Michael and I share connections through both Purdue and Kansas State University. When he was working as Dr. Purdue, I was working on my undergrad, and then when he was a professor at K-State, I was working on my doctorate. Michael and I walked the same halls in Waters and Cranner, but we never worked together. So I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. Welcome to the patio, Michael.
Glad to be here.
Great. Well, one of the things that we do not shy away from here on the patio is coming out with both guns blazing. So we'll jump right into it. Michael, when you look at the agriculture today, do you think we're dealing with fundamentally different problems in the 1980s? Or are the pressures really the same? We just have a lot more zeros associated with them.
Well, if you compare what's going on today with the 1980s, there's certainly a couple major differences, and then I want to talk a little bit about those. First, when we started hitting the financial crisis in the early 1980s and going into the mid 1980s, there was substantially more debt on the balance sheets, and particularly on the non-current side, and so that really created a lot of financial stress. Yes, the returns were very low, but if there wouldn't have been quite as much debt, the financial stress wouldn't have been near as severe. And so we've had two periods since 2007, the start of the ethanol boom, where we've had some relatively low net returns. This is primarily for crop producers. I'm focusing on crop producers today. I can talk about livestock, but I'm focusing on crop producers. The 2014 to 2019 period was relatively low profitability for corn, soybean, and wheat producers. And then starting in 24, 25, 26, and probably going into 27 is another period of relatively low net returns. What's different between the 2014 to 2019 and the current period compared to the 1980s is the balance sheet is much better. And particularly on the non-current side. And one of the things that's making the balance sheet so strong is land values. If you look at since the start of the ethanol boom, land values for the Eastern Corn Belt here, for example, and it's not that much different in other parts of the Corn Belt, are nearly triple what they were in 2007. And so even if you've borrowed more money over the years, which most people have, you're still looking at a pretty good debt to asset ratio, particularly in the non-current side. And so that's the major difference. When you look at the percentage of farms using University of Minnesota FinBin data or K-State data or Illinois data, the percent of farms that are having low returns, very low returns, it's high. It's right up there with some of the 1980 years, and again, the difference being the debt. The other big difference is more of the competitive landscape. This is thinking more globally. The big difference between today and the 1980s, and that's the increasing presence or competitiveness of Brazil. My goodness, the rate at which they've increased soybean production and corn production has just been phenomenal in the last 20 to 30 years, and so that's a major difference compared to what we were in the 1980s, and so that probably makes it a little harder to get out of these ruts, if you will, because you've got a lot of supply outside of the U.S. more than the market share of the U.S. crop is just not as big, particularly for soybeans, as it was, and it makes it a little harder to get out of these periods of low net return because even though we were dealing with a global market in the 1980s, it's increasingly global today, and that creates another set of challenges.
But there's a disconnect between the balance sheet and the cash flow, loan approval, and accounting that our loan officers work with. Do you see a disconnect between those two?
Oh, definitely. I mean, Definitely. I mean, the lenders really want both. It's one thing to have a strong balance sheet, but if your cash flow looks really weak, particularly on the operating debt side, they're very leery to borrow money, and that's a problem today. There's no doubt about that. It's certainly difficult, more difficult to get loans, right now than it was from 2007 to 2013. Kind of the start of the ethanol boom, and then certainly 21, 22, that time period was also really good. It's much more difficult today. There's no doubt about that. It's nice to have a strong balance sheet, but that doesn't pay the bills. Because think about what it means to have a strong non-current balance sheet. That's really nice because it kind of gives you a cushion in case things are bad. You can borrow against land that you own, for example, but you can't spend appreciation. That's one of the challenges we face. Is a lot of our returns in agriculture, and this has been the case for a long time, a lot of our return on assets over time is really associated with appreciation of land. In fact, if you look at the USDA ERS data, it's over half the rate of return in agriculture since 2007 in particular is associated with appreciation in land values. That doesn't help you pay the operating note.
Is the switch to cash accounting, or not cash accounting, but cash flow analysis for loan approval, is that a positive legacy of the 80s farm crisis?
Probably. I think not just probably, it is. I mean, I think they want both a strong balance sheet and a solid cash flow, because if land values would start to slide, I'm not saying they are going to, but if land values would start to slide, there goes some of your cushion, and so you need both. You need to have that positive cash flow and a strong balance sheet.
You brought up return on investment and how land values, the appreciation can change that. Are we in agriculture using wrong matrices?
Not necessarily the wrong. It just creates a challenge when you have low net returns because the operating part of the return on investment, return on assets is relatively low, and so it does create a challenge. Challenge that way. I mean, I look at land ownership, for example, as a dividend paying stock. And so that's the way that's an analogy I use all the time when I talk to people. You have a net return to land, and if you're an owner and you're renting the ground, you have the cash rent. But the real, a major part of that benefit is just owning the land, and that makes it more difficult to make to have a positive cash flow year after year. And that's one of the reasons why we talk so much about cash, and the short side of the balance sheet. I've talked about the non-current portion being very important for loans, particularly term debt loans. But the working capital is so important in agriculture. It always has been, but probably even more so today. Given the fact that the large operations borrow heavily for operating debt. We've got to manage that working capital, and that old rule of thumb, having a current ratio above 2 is so important. We've got to be really careful what we spend our working capital on, in particular when we have really good years. And producers think about this. When you have really good years, you're sometimes tempted to be buying a lot of machinery and other things like that. And that's all well and good, but you got to make sure that we're preserving that working capital so that we have a cushion when things get tight, because they always do. We have cycles in agriculture. It's not uncommon to have a period like we're going through right now. That's just not that uncommon. People ask me, is this something that's going to last a long time? Well, not necessarily. We had 6 years, 2014 to 2019. Yes, this could last another 6 years, but we can't foresee necessarily what's going to get us out of this, but something will. We'll have some kind of supply shock. There'll be some kind of demand shock. Something like that will come along, and these low returns will turn into high returns at least for another 2-3 years. It seems to happen. And going back to 2007, we had 6 really good years. And then we had some bad years, and then we had 3 or 4 good years, and now we're going through another period of relatively low returns, and that's just the way agriculture works, and it just stresses the importance of the working capital and having a strong liquidity position.
Well, and we never know when that flock of black swans will come from on high.
Yeah, you just don't know. I mean, this year's I wouldn't call them black swan necessarily, but this year's a good example of that. I mean, we had high input costs even before we got into the Iran conflict, and now we have really high diesel prices. They're double what they were, and even nitrogen is 40, 50, 60% higher than what it was. I mean, if you look at April 25 to April 26, in my calculations using the Illinois production report, a USDA report, and hydrous is up 45%. Just in that year to year, and so you just never know, and that again stresses that importance of that working capital. We give presentations here, Top Farmer and other conferences in particular, that talk about managing working capital and thinking through that. I need working capital for a couple different things. I need it as a cushion for low returns, but I also need it if I have an expansion opportunity. If it looks like a farm next door is somebody's going to retire and he's going to rent some ground, we want to be able to take advantage of that opportunity, or at least look into that opportunity, and that's where that strong cash flow is so important.
You've talked about scale. Has scale changed the psychology of decision making and how we look at working capital?
Definitely. Definitely. And if you look at the farm structure that we have today, and you look at the USDA ERS metrics for the entire farm economy, I don't know how they're not always extremely useful, because they're including retirement farms, partially retired farms, or part-time farms, and then the full-time farms. And certainly the situation for part-time, semi-retired farms is different than the situation for full-time farms. The retirement part-time farms tend to have low debt. They've got off-farm income. They have, if it's semi-retired, a lot of farms will slowly but surely, shrink in size. Maybe they'll start farming the ground that's right around their home place, and get rid of some of the other ground. They tend to have very low debt. Well, they're in a totally different situation than the full-time operators. Have multiple generations, sometimes multiple members of the same generation farming together. There, they have to really focus a lot on how much debt is right for their operation, and what does working capital look like, and what does their debt to asset look like. It's just night and day when you're looking at managing liquidity, looking at a full-time farm versus the other types of farms. And as I tell some audiences, if you look at the USDA ERS data, they have an annual report that kind of talks about the structure of U.S. agriculture, and year in and year out, if you look at the full-time operators, it's only 10% of the farms. And those 10% are just different. How we think about those is just so different. It's more like managing any other small business, where you have to be very careful, that you're borrowing money for the right reason. You're getting assets or actually earning something. That's why land is such an attractive asset. It appreciates rather than depreciates, like machinery and buildings. You got to be very careful with machinery and buildings, particularly if you try to pay too big a down payment for those. You might regret that later on. It's just different. For the larger farms, and that's one of the reasons why. And I know you're probably going to ask a question or two about the Ag Economy Barometer. That's one of the reasons why when we do the Ag Economy Barometer survey, we are focusing on full-time farms, because we think the sentiment would be quite different. It's not that the sentiment of the other farms is not interesting. It's just that I don't want to combine the two, because I really believe the sentiment would be different if this is your full-time business. You're garnering most of the money from the farm. You're going to have a different outlook on things than if this is just something that you do on weekends or at nights. It's just really, really different perspective. I mean, I have a lot of people I know in Nebraska, and just you talk to the people that are part-time farmers versus the full-time farmers. It's just a different conversation.
Let's hone in on that. Let's call them the professional farmers. Are they more resilient, or does their scale build in resiliency?
Are they more resilient? I think they have to pay attention more to resilience. I do think that they're not necessarily more resilient, but you can measure resilience in a lot of different ways. And one of the ways that we've tried to do it here with a couple surveys, with a couple of really good graduate students that I've worked with, is we've tried to measure ability to manage strategic risk. That's how we've approached this. And when we did that, that was a survey a couple of years ago. When we did that, we found that that some of the larger operators tended to focus on some of the things related to strategic risk. They paid more attention to their competitive position because they have to. And so from that regard, they're more resilient. But from a downside risk perspective, it depends on how you define resilience. From a downside risk perspective, they're more exposed. There's no doubt about it because they have more debt. But things like the management practices, understanding accrual accounting, things like that, you're much more likely to see those adapted by the larger operations, and that's no surprise that you would because they're managing multiple millions. There's millions of dollars in assets that they're managing, and so they just need to pay closer attention to what's going on.
Could you dive just a little bit deeper in what do you mean by strategic risk?
Strategic risk is the risk that you face if you're out of competitive position. What I mean by that, let's say you were trucking along and you were saying, I'm going to be a value-added producer. Whatever commodity is, I'm going to get a better price for my product than somebody else for whatever reason. I'm going to focus on that. Things change. The classic case is you get into something that's relatively high margin. Other people see that it's relatively high margins, and they get into that business too. Think about organic. If there's a large margin for organic corn, for example, which there is periodically, people tend to get into that business and try to capture that margin. So your competitive position, your strategy changes. And that's what we mean by managing strategic risk is how do you handle when the environment changes? How do you adjust your management strategies when the environment changes? The classical is geopolitical risk. How did you manage the high prices coming out of the Russia-Ukraine conflict when that started? How did you manage the Iran conflict? The high prices coming out of the Iran conflict. That's the classic geopolitical risk. The other big geopolitical risk is we're in that different environment for soybeans, for example. And so doing what you've always done in terms of marketing soybeans or producing soybeans is probably not going to cut it. It's a much more competitive environment globally. So we need to, if our goal is to be a low cost producer, we need to be checking that. And ensuring that we're maintaining that position, not only in the U.S. but globally. And so one of the questions that garnered a lot of interest that we asked recently of the Ag Economy in the Ag Economy Barometer survey was, are you concerned about the relative competitiveness of Brazil and the U.S.? That was 2/3 said definitely. And so that's just an example. It's just everything's global now, and so you got to be assessing. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And can I adapt to these shocks that we see? Can I stay competitive despite the fact that Brazil's expanding? I mean, all these kinds of things are very important, and that's what I mean by strategic risk. What's my strategy, and does my strategy need to change as the environment changes? And the classic case in agriculture here is a lot of people have had the goal of being a low-cost producer. Mike Bolge and myself have talked about the fact that there's probably going to be an increasing amount of people look at more of a value added. As consumers value certain attributes of commodities, you need to decide where you're at with respect to that trend. And I'll give you a very precise example here. In Indiana, our beef industry is not the same as the beef industry in Kansas and Nebraska that I grew up with, and I worked at Kansas State for all those years. It's not the same, but we have some beef producers that do really well here because they can sell freezer beef. Maybe they're selling to the retail, and so that's the kind of idea is to think about what is it that I can do that takes advantage of my strengths, that gives me higher returns than I would have otherwise. If I just wanted to be if I wanted to background finish cattle here, even if it was on a small scale, it would be awful hard to go one-on-one with an operation in Nebraska and Kansas, since you have to think about how can I do things differently here. So that's a simple example. And one of the things that's remarkable to me as I compare Nebraska and Indiana is blessed with more value-added opportunities. I don't really know necessarily why, other than maybe there's more agribusiness food industries in this area compared to Nebraska. Nebraska's not very populated. The parts of Kansas aren't either. But for example, in Indiana, there's a lot of opportunities to grow popcorn, waxy corn, white corn, seed soybeans. I mean, more opportunities than my family has, and other people I know in Nebraska, and so we need to take advantage of that. And so that's a value-added strategy, and if that's a way for us to get a dime, 20 cents, 30 cents more per bushel, that really adds up. When you're talking 2,000, 3,000 acre farm plus, and so keeping track of those margins and doing everything I can to increase the margins. It's not just a low cost environment anymore. Having said that, obviously low costs are still important, but I do think the value added strategy is increasingly important, and I do think, and I'm hoping my colleagues do more studies like this, but I have a hunch. We did some studies a long time ago at Kansas State where we looked at the relative profitability differences among producers, and we looked at scale, we looked at technology use. We looked at marketing. We looked at all these factors like that. And we said, which of these is really explaining differences in profitability? Marketing was not very big. I think that's changing. I think there's opportunities now. If there's opportunities now for larger farms, particularly if they have grain storage, to perhaps do a better marketing job than their peers. I think there's more opportunities for that today than there was in the past. And it's not just higher price, it's also risk mitigation. We've done some studies recently, and this was with Jim Menard. He's more of a marketing person. He's retired now, but he's more of a marketing person than I am, but I was involved in them. We did some really simple studies and about storage strategies. And in the Eastern Corn Belt here, it typically pays to store, and store at least until March or April. And so knowing that, keeping track of that and being very cognizant of that, those kinds of things are very important because, again, a nickel, a dime makes a lot of difference.
As you're talking about scale and least cost and value added, as a professor and an ag economist, do you feel like you're more like your colleagues over in the business school?
Yes, I do think we are sounding more like them, but I've been around Mike Bulgy for a long time, and he was not shy about borrowing concepts from business and using them in agriculture, and that's one of the things I really learned from him. There's a lot we can borrow from the business school, and because we're particularly if they're talking about small businesses, I mean we're not Fortune 500 here, so some of their strategies are completely different, mergers and acquisitions and all that stuff. But certainly there's some things that we can borrow. Strategic management is one of those. I think that's very powerful. And then I don't know if you've met him, but we've got Trey Malone is now here at Purdue in the Mike Bulgy chair, and he's really given quite a few presentations on strategy. And so I've been talking a lot with him. So yeah, I definitely think there's some things we can borrow from the business school and use here, just like we did borrow from accounting and finance. We've borrowed the accrual accounting. I mean, we've also borrowed financial metrics from the corporate finance world, corporate finance textbooks. I think we can do the same with strategy and even marketing. As we get into these value added products, that becomes really important. The marketing aspect.
Michael, as you work with these professional producers at 10% that are real farmers, how do you help them decouple tax accounting from accrual and real class accounting so they can see what they're doing on their farms?
Well, actually, the one of the things I do is tell them that the accrual adjustments are not that complicated. They really aren't. If we have we have a little tool, for example, that some people have used, but we use it in particular as a teaching tool in classrooms, and also I've used it in outreach programs. That basically you put in a Schedule F or cash flow information, you put in a beginning and ending balance sheet, and then you use that information to calculate the accrual profitability. And really, if you have a good balance sheet that's done at the same time every year. I always recommend January 1, do the balance sheet January 1 and have a good set of cash flow information. The accrual adjustments are not that hard. The big one is crop inventory, making sure that's accurate. The other one is prepaids, making sure that you have an accurate account of your prepaids. But those are the big two. And if we have accurate inventories of those things, those adjustments are pretty straightforward. And so that's what we're trying to do is try to convince people that this is, accrual sounds scary, but it's not. And one of the things that's a bit challenging in agriculture, but I think other industries are facing the same thing, is there's huge pluses to using the cash basis for taxes.
Yeah.
I'm not going to argue that there's not. There's huge advantages, but it makes us focus too much on cash net income, and cash net income is worthless from a financial metric. You have to cash flow, don't get me wrong, but you can't use that as a profitability measure. We manipulate cash so much with prepaids and holding crops to the next year. And there's just no way that's at all accurate. And so using some, convincing people that we have to take that extra step, to calculate the accruals. I've been on a lifelong mission to try to teach that. And we've made some traction. There's more people doing it than there used to be. I know that. And obviously there's farm management associations that will help you with that. I mean, here we have the farm business, farm management out of Illinois. They're in Indiana now. And so there is people that will help you with that. There's software that will help you with those items. But it's just not that difficult to do.
It's not difficult, but it's a little bit more than clicking that button in QuickBooks.
Yeah, the QuickBooks is good for the cash. Really good for the cash. QuickBooks are quick and they're really good for the cash. And then you combine that with a good balance sheet, and you have the data that you need. Some people have their accountants do that. I mean, there is accountants out there that will do that for people too. But a lot of accountants that work with agriculture are the most interested in doing the taxes. That's where their bread and butter is. That's where they can get the volume. There's reasons why that's the case, and it makes a lot of sense from their standpoint. And so that's why I tell people, if your accountant is not doing that for some people, you need to do it yourself. One of the challenges we have in agriculture about doing these accrual adjustments, and I don't necessarily want to get into these nuances here, but it makes it more difficult as we have multiple entities. And so you're not just doing this for one entity, you're doing it for 3-4 entities on a lot of these farms. And even farms that are, I would say, they're full-time farms, but I would say they're middle-sized, 1,000, 2,000 acres, in that range even, might have multiple entities, because it's really common to have a separate entity for like the semis. And you've got to be able to combine that entity, the information from the entities together. Another challenge is a lot of farms will rent ground from themselves. There's actually good tax reasons to do that, and so they own ground outside the entity and they rent to themselves. Well, those things need to be taken care of, because if you ignore that, and you calculate your cash based on the fact that you're cash flowing from yourself, and then you ignore that in your entity balance sheet, your balance sheet's not accurate, because there's no land on the balance sheet. Your balance sheet's ugly. I mean, and so you got to combine them. And so that's a nuance that's a little more difficult. And I had some colleagues at Kansas State, and I know there's people at FBFM and University of Minnesota and the FinBin crowd that also are good at this, but it really, working with somebody to think through that, I think, is very important, because it's not necessarily rocket science, but the first time you do that, there's a lot of nuances there. I mean, essentially, what you got to do with that cash rent is you got to back out that cash and then put the land on your balance sheet.
But as you're describing that multiple entity, aren't those strategies that the Fortune 500 use?
Oh, yeah, there's good reasons why there is multiple entities. It just makes it a challenge to analyze.
But doesn't that show that agricultures can adapt some sophisticated accounting and business entity strategies?
Oh yeah. They're taking advantage of things that other businesses would also do. I mean, renting land from yourself is no different than a group of attorneys or a group of doctors, having a facility that they all work in, they own, and they rent it to themselves. So this is other people do this. It's perfectly okay, and it's a good strategy. You just have to combine the fact that you're doing that. You need to account for that when you're trying to come up with your metrics, your financial metrics. It just makes the financial metrics more difficult to compute.
Well, one thing that you've said several times is education, and you've been involved in being a professor since 1990. Are the agricultural students different now than they were in 1990, 1991?
One of the differences that you definitely see is it's a much more diverse a group of students in terms of backgrounds. Particularly when I was coming out of the 1980s, and the people going into the graduate school tended to have a farm background, that's the exception today. And even at the undergraduate level, there's still a lot of kids that have that background, but that's not the norm today. We're seeing a lot of students that maybe their grandfather farmed, maybe they had 4-H animals. I mean, various backgrounds, and that's kind of neat, because there's opportunities for a lot of people in agribusiness. I mean, we need people from all different backgrounds, and so that's kind of nice to see. It's kind of nice to see. It makes it a little challenging trying to recruit farm management economists for graduate students and at the professor level. That's not. You don't necessarily have to have the farm background, but it does help. It does help. You probably wouldn't necessarily go into that area unless you had that background. So there's some challenges with that. And I think some agribusinesses would like to see at least some background, agronomic background, background working with animals, because they probably can hit the ground running a little quicker in terms of communicating with producers. Let's think lenders, for example. But we're in a world today where that's not necessarily going to be the case. There's just fewer rural people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do, and I think Purdue's done a pretty good job of trying to recruit, in both rural areas and urban areas, and even out of state. Because you compare us to Kansas and Nebraska, we're very populated. We're a small state. There's over 7 million people. We're very populated, and so we're gonna have to have a diverse background if in the College of Agriculture. If we're going to have mostly Indiana students, we're going to have a very diverse background.
I think about my son-in-law that farms in Cass County, Nebraska, south of Omaha. And when he moves from field to field, he thinks, will I see a car? When I move from field to field, I say, how many cars will I see?
Yeah.
And so as we're talking about business entities, what does agriculture think they have figured out, but in reality we have wrong?
I think I'm going to answer that question. What could we do? Could we do better? This is coming from an ag economist, so you have to remember that. But when you're particularly when you're talking about the multiple generation, multiple member farms, that we really, really need to have one person that focuses on ag econ kinds of stuff. And so one of the presentations I love to give related to transition planning is related to skills and management transfer. And I always say, you don't need someone coming into the business that has the same strengths that you have. I know production is really important. I'm gonna say that right out, because I don't want anybody to think that I don't know that. I know production is really important, but we also need somebody that's really good at thinking about purchasing assets efficiently, marketing grain, making sure that we have the financial metrics that we need to make decisions. We need people of different skills in the business. And I'm not saying we necessarily do that wrong. That's been really challenging because I see a lot of farms still where they're most of the strength is related to machinery, taking care of machinery and production, and we've got to be broader than that. That's the way I would put that. We need to be broader than that, and making sure that we're filling all these holes. And some of these we can pick up elsewhere. I mean, if finance is not our thing, there is people out there that will help you with that. If that's not your true love. It's going to cost, but there is people out there that help you with that. And the same is true with marketing. There is people out there that will help you with that. But as with all of those things, even if you have someone help you with that, you've got to know enough to know that what you need to provide and what your goal is. That's so true on the marketing side. You don't want just that person just to take over. They need to know, what's my tax strategy? Why do I, regardless of the price, why do I spread my marketing my crop over time? Why don't I try to sell it all at seasonal high or something like that? They need to know that stuff, and so you have to think, you have to know enough to provide the information to that expert. And so I still go back to, you have to have that person that has some of this knowledge about this ag econ stuff. Now, it's probably no coincidence that when I give presentations out in the state, the people I talk to the most are the ag econ graduates, because they say, "Oh yeah, I knew such and such person." And they say, when I went there, is that person still alive? These kinds of conversations, and so that's no coincidence. But I do know that there's still a lot of farms that don't have that point person, and they really need that. And this is what makes the sole proprietorship so difficult. We have overwhelmingly, a large number of sole proprietors, even fairly large farms, are sole proprietors. They just have a lot of hired workers. That is so challenging. And so if a person is a sole proprietor, they probably think that, particularly if it's relatively large and they're hiring people, they probably need to hire, part of their hiring strategy should be people that have skills other than what they have. And so maybe that means paying a little bit more money for some different skills. I don't know how else to do it, because you really need to have a lot of different skills in these businesses. As I go back to again, I mean, you're talking farms that have millions of dollars worth of assets and well over $1 million in sales. I mean, it doesn't take that large a farm to get there anymore, and so you just have to be able to manage that. And another thing that's really difficult in agriculture, but this is family businesses. Family businesses are like this. There's huge advantages to family businesses. Okay. Reading the business literature and talking to Maria Marshall, she's a colleague of mine that does a lot of research on family businesses. One of the big advantages is you can make decisions quickly if everybody gets along. If everybody gets along, you can make decisions very quickly. What's the disadvantage? They may not get along. The other disadvantage is they may all have the same skills, and so managing the family business is unique to agriculture, can be a real advantage, but we need to make sure we try to operate so it's an advantage rather than a disadvantage.
As you're working with these family businesses, do you see AI as a benefit for them?
Definitely. I definitely think AI is going to have a place. I'm not exactly sure what the ramifications are going to be, but I think it'd be particularly important if you're working with experts. It's a good way for you to get some quick background. I'll give you some examples that I've used recently, and I'm not even using a very sophisticated versions of AI. Just the search engines today they're using AI. They are so powerful, even compared to what they were 5 years ago. Recently I was doing some work where I needed to have some custom rates. We have a custom rate survey, and Iowa has a custom rate survey, but not all the operations are on that survey. And so I typed it into the AI. I think it was Weed Zapper. They use those in organic rotations. It comes up with a value and a source. And so AI is so useful, to kind of add to your knowledge base, to give you a first guess of what things look like. And then if you and again, it's a way for you to train yourself so you can talk more intelligently to the expert, because that's always important. If you're going to go to an attorney and you're thinking about transition plan, you need to know something about what your goals are. Well, you can help yourself think through this stuff by using AI. I think it can help. It can help with agronomic decisions. I gave you some examples on ag econ. It can help. It can help in ag econ. Another thing I did the other day is I wanted to know what the value of some used grain bins. And so I typed it into AI. Now I have to to double check where it's getting that information, but the thing is, it's just instantaneous. And so I think AI is extremely powerful as information you can use to help make decisions. I have a colleague here that's right next to me here, Chad Fichter, and he's doing a lot more with AI, primarily from a research side. It makes lit reviews very easy. Okay. Extremely easy. So he's using it primarily from that, but he's convincing me that it's going to be very helpful in extension. Think about an educator out there that gets all these oddball questions. Well, you can use the search engine, the AI engine, to help you think about this problem, and so it's going to be powerful. There's no doubt about it. Not just for academics, but for also for farmers, just in general to help make decisions.
Well, that you're talking about sole proprietors, I use ChatGPT and Claude Sonnet. And in some of my decisions, I'm using those two against each other, kind of like a board of directors. So I'll say, hey, I want to do X, and I'll throw it over to Merlin, or my ChatGPT interaction, and get that answer. And then I'll say the same thing to Claude Sonnet, and they'll get it, and then I'll throw it to both of them. And it is truly like going down the row of offices there in Cranert and saying, hey, what do you think of this? And what do you think of this? And it gives you instantaneous feedback.
Yes. Yeah, think about if you're out there and you calculate the profit margins and you say, okay, I got a profit margin that's 5% in 25. What does that mean? Is that good, bad, indifferent? I guarantee you could type that you could use AI to help you figure out whether that's a good metric or not. And those are the kinds of things, and it's instantaneous. I mean, it's so powerful. It's so powerful. One of the things that we're using it here in-house at the center is Sarah Zahn is our assistant here, and she handles the web and also helps us with podcasts. She loves to do that stuff, and she's using AI to write script for our podcasts. And because she's doing that, we can do more podcasts. We're doing longer podcasts and now some really shorties. All the shorties are scripted. And what she does is she'll take our article or slides and puts that into a Claude or something like that and comes up with a script. And then you have to look at it, but it's amazing how close it is to what you want it to be. I mean, the first time I did that, I said, this isn't going to work. It's not going to work. It works. And we do that all the time now, particularly with the short ones. We have what we call ag briefs that are 5 minutes or less. All of those are scripted with AI.
Well, I think agriculture and the nature of our solitude really blends into adapting AI because it allows us to expand when we're alone.
Oh, you had a nail on the head there. You're in rural U.S. anywhere. I mean, you may not. There might not be a person anywhere near you to ask these questions with. If you wanted to do it in person, you just type it in real quickly, and you got some information. You always got to ground truth it, but you have some information. That weed zapper, I can't get over that example. I said, where am I going to get a custom rate for a weed zapper? And I typed that in, and I got some information.
That's really cool.
So it blows me away. I mean, when I first heard about this a while back, I said, well, it's not going to be that big a deal because it's just going to be as good as the information that's out there. Even if that's the case, when you're searching the internet just blindly, you don't know where to search. AI does it for you. It takes all that information that's out there and collapses it into a usable package. And another thing I'm using it for a lot is I write a lot of short articles, and sometimes that introduction is really hard to write because you want some background there. I always use it now. I don't write it for the whole. I don't use it for the whole article yet. But because some people do, they'll have a draft with AI and then they'll work on it. But I do use it as background information for my introduction, so that I know that I'm pulling from the proper literature. Particularly, I don't know the business literature I know some business literature, but that's a big literature, and so I'm making sure that I'm not missing something. If I'm going to talk about strategy, I'm making sure I'm not missing something. And so I type some simple questions into the search engine, and it pops up, and away we go.
And here's the thing about the discussion that we're having, Michael. We're a similar generation, and I think we are the exception to the rule that we're using it. And it makes what we do more powerful because it's expanding our ability to be expert.
Yeah. I had a conversation at the International Farm Management Congress. It was in Argentina this year, with a couple of my colleagues, Estentia colleagues around the country, and one of them in particular says, I absolutely have to do this because we write so many short articles, and there's demand for that. There's less of us than there used to be. There's demand for this, and so AI could help generate more. And I'll give you an example. That grain bin question comes up all the time. Why couldn't I use AI to come up with a simple little paper? These are some of the things you need to think about. That would be easy. But it's the same as for the producer. Think about how hard it was to figure out what your tractor was worth 20 years ago. Now you've got all kinds of information you can draw on that's on the internet. What is that? Machine Repeat? There's all kinds of places that you could draw from and get a good idea of what it's worth. That's just one example of many.
Yeah, but using ChatGPT to get a value on your John Deere 8300 isn't near as much fun as scrolling through Fastline and look at it. Oh, look at that.
Yeah. My colleague uses it all the time. Again, he's primarily using it for lit review, but he's starting to use it more for extension, and it's exciting because he tells me, he gives an example is I've written a lot of stuff on financial metrics. He says that would be at your fingertips. If you could put a set of financial statements into the ChatGPT, and it would take all that background information and say these are good points and these are bad points instantaneously. And so we're heading there. We're going to be experimenting with some of this.
Well, that sounds fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun, particularly if you can get some really good graduate students to work on the project too. We've got some really good ones right now, and so.
I think it would be interesting for you as an ag economist to gauge the adaptability to AI across generations or age criteria. Yeah.
We have a question on next month's Ag Economy Barometer, a really simple one that Chad had me put in there, just basically asking whether they think AI is going to improve their labor and management, their ability to manage labor machinery. And we just put some buckets in there. I'm very curious to see what they say. I bet there won't be very many people say it's a lot, but this is a question that we're going to ask periodically. We're going to kind of gauge how this builds over time. Because I think some producers are just starting to use it. It's going to build. When someone tells them that you can, it's just like me talking to that guy, that I know from Wyoming, that he got me excited about it. That's all it would take from a farmer too. Is his somebody he knows really well, might be a same generation, might be a different generation, tells them I could do this. They'll get excited about it, and then it changes our job a little bit too, because they have more information at their fingertips, and so you got to think about you always got to think about what's our unique contribution. I think there's still some unique contribution for research and extension, because we still do a good job of packaging things, and probably better than AI can at this point. Making relationships and stuff like that. But we got to be cognizant of that. Probably less answering some of these simple questions. Maybe putting some papers up there that help people, to look at that. And more in-depth analysis, perhaps. So it's going to change all of our lives. But I can't imagine how it's going to change a lot. Journalism and people like me that write. It's going to change what we do a lot. But one of the things I didn't think I would do near as much of, and this is not an AI thing, but one of the things I didn't think I'd do near as much of is these podcasts. But I'm just convinced that we did a couple really simple surveys about what people use to get their information, and it's all over the board. Some people still read like Indiana Prairie Farmers, the farm magazines. So the younger generation probably doesn't even know that those exist. I'm overemphasizing, but the younger generation, everything is on the phone, okay? And so they're looking at podcasts, YouTube videos, and so if you're gonna deliver information to all those generations, you've got to do all of them, and if AI makes it easier to do all of those, that's what we need to do. And so that's what gets me excited about AI, is if that enables me to do that. So that now what we're trying to do is we write a short article, We always do a podcast with it. Well, if I can get some help writing the article and scripting the podcast, it makes my life so much easier, and I can also put out more stuff because there's fewer of us. You asked about students. One of the things that's different about extension is there's a lot fewer of us. When I came to Purdue in 14 years ago, there was probably a dozen people that they weren't all extension that worked in farm management. Now there's 2 or 3. Okay? And we're probably a little extreme, but I talked to my colleagues at other universities. The trend is there. And so we got to constantly think about how we can do our jobs better. And the AI is part of that.
And the university sector is probably where we need to do more with less than a lot of places.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm really trying to, this with the help of Chad, but we're really trying to get the educators excited about using AI because they're increasingly having to covering more than one county. And if you're going to do that, this could really help you answer questions.
More than one county and more than one discipline.
Yes, yeah, more than one discipline, and you're just going to have to have a bigger knowledge base. One of the ways to get that bigger knowledge base immediately is through AI, and teaching people how to use AI. That should be a major goal of extension is continuing to talk and give presentations on how to use it. Chad's been doing some of those, and I think that's very, very useful. Not just educators, but producers and everybody. This is kind of some of the ins and outs of doing it, so that they can make better decisions.
So as we kind of wrap up, and before we jump into my 5 questions,
yeah.
Michael, after all these years in the university and ag economics, farm management, what are some questions that you wish people would ask you?
I wish more people would ask me, how do I calculate a profit margin? Why is a profit margin so important? I wish people would ask me that more. I wish people would ask me more questions about, how can I develop a strategy for our farm? So strategic management, those are 2 areas I wish they would ask more questions of. And I jokingly said at a meeting a while back, as I spent 30 years trying to get people to calculate financial ratios, and somewhat, a little bit of success there, but not as successful as I'd like to be. Now I'm going to spend the rest of my time talking about business planning and strategic management and see if I can make tiny inroads. But those are the 2 areas I wish they would ask me more, and ask less questions about what's the price of corn going to be in 1 month. I don't know any more than they do. And so less questions like that, and more questions related to finance and strategy.
Asking about financial strategy goes back to what we talked about before. And you think about that family business, that we need to have a strategic analysis of why we need to hire somebody, not, we need to hire somebody.
Yes, and one of the challenges with transition planning is the question is not, do I have enough work for everybody to do? The answer to that's always yes. Particularly if we don't change what we do, how we do it. The real question is it feasible? And so I talk about that. Is it feasible to add another family member? We just go through some basic metrics. How much gross income do you typically need for a worker? Those kinds of things. And so that's an important question, important thing for them to think through also.
But that gets back to that question you wished you were asked more often. How do I develop a strategy?
Yes, how do I develop a strategy? If you want to bring somebody in, how do you develop a strategy to make sure that person can be brought in 5 years from now? And one of the things that some families are struggling with is they've got multiple people that want to join the business. And so they really have to decide what's our criteria. They need to have certain skills? Did they start part-time, get paid a salary, and then join full-time? This day of, well, I'm here. I'm ready to join the business is probably not going to work because again, it goes back to that strategy. Can we grow fast enough to add 4 people one time? Probably not. And so that strategy is so important if transition planning is your most important goal. And we've done several different questions on that in the Ag Economy Barometer survey about goals, and a transition planning is the most important goal for about 40% of the respondents. Given that, what's your strategy? How am I going to make sure this works? And it's for both sides, because you don't want the person to come in and then the retirement of the older generation stinks, because there just wasn't enough money there. At the same token, that if that person's going to come in and they had really high expectations for what they were going to make, you don't want them to be mightily disappointed. So you got to have a strategy.
Think about your time from when you left the farm in the 80s until 2026. How many farms have added somebody simply because they were the oldest son or daughter, and not because they were the best son or daughter?
I don't know percentages, but it happens. It still happens too frequently. They're adding people for the wrong reasons. It's got to be a fit. It's got to be a fit for the farm. It's got to be a fit for the person that's going to enter the business. They have to be able to give a good reason for why me. Not just because I'm a family member, why me? And don't just necessarily assume that it's going to be the oldest male. That's really changed. It's the person that's interested, that has the skills and the ideas that can make this work. That might be the third. That might be the third child that's female. And so think more broadly about who we bring in and what skills are they bringing.
So Shay Folk in my interview this week said, "I'm not going to hire you because you share my last name. I'm going to hire you because you have the best fit."
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. We're hiring you and that's good for the younger generation too. Don't you want to be hired because I'm the best person for the job? Most people do, regardless of your family. Most people would like that too. And you never know who's going to join the business. I mean, I know situations back in Nebraska where they might have multiple children, and I'd say, well, it's probably going to be that person. It didn't end up being that person. And so you just never know how these things work out. You kind of have to gauge interest and what skills they've gained, and pick the person that has the best is the best fit.
But once again, the only way that you understand the fit is if you have a strategy.
Yes, and I really believe in a testing period for both sides. I really like the idea of working for a wage for 2-3 years, then joining the business.
Well, Michael, we've had a great conversation.
Yeah.
We're only 2 hours and 15 minutes apart between Krannert and Grayville, Indiana. I really appreciate your perspective. I really appreciate that you and I have similar paths, and we crossed paths in the past, but never really talked.
Yeah, agriculture is really a small world.
So we end every podcast with 5 questions. What is one lesson from ag that you carry with you every day?
One lesson from ag that I carry with me every day. I think it's really from my family members. It's the importance of work ethic, and not only work ethic, but trying to do something that you truly enjoy, so that it's not just work. I know that sounds like too easy of an answer, but I think that's so important, to find something that you enjoy and be willing to put in the time to be successful. I see very, very few successful people that haven't really worked hard to get to that success. And I always say, and this is very true, I've worked with a lot of people that were smarter than me that didn't have it here, that just did not have the oomph, and were not successful. Some of them left. Some of them ended up leaving academia. It just wasn't for them. Maybe it just wasn't a good fit. If you go back to that fit question, maybe they went through because they couldn't think of anything else to do. So they're just natural just to keep going to school. They liked school and they were good at it. And then when they got all said and done, they said, I don't really like to do this. and so that's so important. Find something that's a good fit for you, and then spend the time to be successful at
it. You're not the first person to say work ethic.
Yeah.
Second question is, if you could have coffee with any historical figure in ag, who would it be?
Oh, any historical figure?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. Probably Pope John Paul II.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, for a couple of different reasons. First of all, I just have a tremendous respect, for him. I think he was extremely good for the Catholic Church. But also I credit him with ending the Soviet Union, along with Ronald Reagan, and I just think that was positive historically. So that would be the person I would pick.
You are the only one to ever mention the pontiff.
Not real surprising. I would have said, if you told me two, I'd have said Ronald Reagan and John Paul II for the same reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were so instrumental in ensuring that the USSR no longer exists.
That is a great answer, Michael. I love it. What is one quirky or underappreciated thing about ag more people should understand?
One unappreciated thing about production ag. I think a lot of people talk about this, but it's really true. There's too many people today that don't understand how their food is made. I just run across professors that will tell me questions they get, and I say, what? And we can't just take it for granted, even teaching undergraduates in the College of Agriculture anymore, because they go back to that diverse background. And so it's almost like you need to make sure in those beginning classes that you give a lot of examples about production agriculture. And this would be true at any industry you're studying. You want to understand that industry, and that's one of the things you need to understand is the process of how food is made. How is a potato chip made? I mean, some of the basics of that. And where does your milk come from? And these kinds of things. That from a general perspective, that I think that's how I would answer that. I'll go back. I always go back to the Ag Economy Barometer. It's my favorite activity, but I go back to the Ag Economy Barometer. One of the things I like about that is I don't only talk to farm press. I talk to non-farm press. That's my opportunity, and hopefully I'm doing a good job. But that's my opportunity to teach them a little bit about production agriculture, because as you probably know, there's some things that they hear that are just off base. That's one of the disadvantages of everything being on the internet. Everything's on the internet, and some of it's not particularly accurate. And so it's a chance for me to really plug the importance of production ag and how good an industry it really is.
Well, think about that headline out of Minnesota that said, "Aged farmer will not plant this year." Well, we all know that the neighbor's going to plant.
I've actually gotten that question before, and I did this spring already. It says, "Well, the profitability is really low. Does that mean they're just going to let it sit in the ground?" And I says, "Yeah." And I understand where that question's coming from, because we're economists. We know the difference between variable and fixed costs. The average person doesn't. They don't understand that even if it sits there, you still get a lot of money. In some cases, even if you're not making all your money, of course you're going to put something in. You're never going to leave it. In my lifetime, I've never seen corn priced below the break even for variable cost. It came close one year. It came very close one year in the 90s one time, but it usually it's not even close. So of course you're going to plant something.
So the fourth question, what is your favorite ag-related tool, product, or innovation?
Oh, that's easy. For me, it's an Excel spreadsheet. And when it went to multiple sheets, I just smiled. I remember the one sheet spreadsheet, and I thought, "Oh, this is just fabulous." And then it went to multiple sheets, and I could do calculations and bring it over to the other sheet, I know everybody doesn't like to use spreadsheets, but they're a powerful tool, and we always make sure that our students are well versed in how to use them.
I sat in a computer lab not far from where your office is and worked on Lotus 123.
Oh yes, I loved Lotus. It was a good spreadsheet.
Yeah, spreadsheet's a great one because we all should be using it.
Yeah.
And then the last question, what is one small change that could make a big impact on agriculture's future?
Well, one small change would make a big impact on agriculture. I don't want to press this too hard because I know a lot of people do it, but if everybody would embrace this notion of lifelong learning, would be the one change that I think would really make a difference. And it's less than what it used to be. I remember growing up, you could point to some farmers that were not very good. It's harder to do that today. We've got some very productive people out there. And for the most part, everybody's pretty productive, but there's still too much difference in productivity among farms for my liking. And I think that part of that's lifelong learning. To have this attitude that I'm going to continually improve and continually do things better. And the way one of the people I know here in Indiana, the way he kind of talks about this, he says, okay, in your career you have 40 corn crops. So every year at the beginning of that crop, you decide, what am I going to do different? What am I going to tweak this year? That's the right mentality. To be always thinking about it. And it goes back to that strategy. I have overall strategy, but I'm constantly thinking about how can I make improvements? And it might be small. It might be really small. But then this notion of, and a lot of farmers are doing this today, and this is a really, really positive in my mind, this notion of even doing on-farm research. For example, we work with some popcorn producers here. It's not real. There's not a lot of experiments like there has been on conventional corn on what the nitrogen rate should be. How do you solve that? Well, you get some people to do some on-farm trials, at 2-3 different rates, and what worked, what didn't work. And so it's all part of that. I think that lifelong learning is so important. I kind of use that as a motto for myself. When I stop learning, it's probably time for me to hang up the cleats.
We should always be inquisitive.
And I think you'd probably say the same.
Oh, yeah.
I learn something new every day. And I'm a very quiet person. I'm actually an introvert, but I love talking to people, particularly one-on-one, because I learn something. Mm-hmm. You learn so much by talking to people, doing the AI, yeah. And so as long as I continue to do that, this job's fun.
Well, Michael, this has been a great conversation. Your words have given us insight into how we should be looking at financials. If people want to look at the Ag Barometer, where should they go?
The best place to look for any of our stuff is the Center for Commercial Agriculture website. If you just type that into Google, Center for Commercial Agriculture, it'll bring up the Ag Economy Barometer and our podcasts and short articles and the whole 9 yards.
That is a great resource of what they're doing at Purdue University for you to have a better understanding of what's going on in your operation and in agriculture in general. We appreciate you spending the time with me and Dr. Langemeier.
You bet. Take care.